Hello there and welcome to this week's Granny's Garden. Now this week it's all about tree borers, or more precisely, how to get rid of them. Tree borer. Well, it makes it sound as if there's really only one little beastie, but in actual fact it's not like that. It's a very generic name of the larva stages or immature stages of several different types of moths or beetles, but they do have one thing in common. They like to riddle our tree with holes. Now these borers tunnel into the inner bark layer, the cambium layer, and what they do is disrupt the flow of water and nutrients from the roots up to the canopy of the tree. Now you can have a partial girdling, which is going to cause dieback on one side of the tree, or you can have a complete girdling, which is going to effectively kill the tree itself. But all these tunnels are going to make the tree very, very weak, and eventually you're going to see splits appearing either in the trunk itself or on the upper limbs. And that's when the tree becomes very dangerous, because at any given time, or even with a bit of wind or a windstorm, those limbs are going to come crashing down. Now, those of you who've been following me will know that this winter we had to take down an alder tree that was suffering from this very condition, and it had become extremely dangerous and a large split had formed on one of the larger limbs. Now, it is important to note that the borers in this case were secondary invaders and not primary invaders. They came to a tree that was already sick, but they certainly finished it off. But either way, the tree had to come down because it was dangerous. So we've inspected our tree. We've seen that it's got holes, and we know now that it has borers. So what can we do, and what are the pros and the cons? Well, there are maybe four possible solutions or possible treatments for tree borers. One would be to go down the ecological route. Then it'd be soil drenching, bark spraying, and endotherapy. Let's go down the ecological route first. What you need to do is from April throughout the summer, you'd be examining the bark almost on a daily basis and examine it for eggs. If you see any eggs on the surface of the bark, you just get hold of them and crush them. Now, the next ecological thing you can do is to try and get hold of the larvae themselves. So you get up close to the holes and try and look for an active hole. Now, this, for instance, is not an active hole. It's a little clear round hole and there's no sawdust-like matter or frass. Now, frass is basically fecal matter. Because these little larvae eat wood, well, what the excrement basically looks like sawdust. So if I come down to a different hole, for instance this one, if I can get it to focus, you can see at the end here there is fecal matter, or there is frass around it. So this would be considered as an active hole. So in an ecological manner, you would get a piece of wire, you would stick it into the hole and basically try and spear the larva and pull it out. Or you'd get a very, very sharp knife and try and open the hole and again try and take the larva out. No chemicals involved. The other thing you can use is BT. Now, BT is considered ecological because it is a natural bacillus that is present in the soil anyway. So what I do, and I'm going to show you now, is you get a syringe, like a 10mm syringe, and mix 50-50 with plain water and with BT, and then you're going to inject it into those active holes. Right, I have here just some plain water. I have a concentrated BT here. I have a blunt fill needle. You don't need a pointed one because it's just going to go into a hole. And of course I've got my little 10mm syringe. Make sure it's all right. Perfect. Obviously you wouldn't do this if the BT was in it. So I just get my water first. And now I'm going to just shake it a bit and open the concentrated BT. To put the top on it. Now the next thing you need to do is inject it into the tree itself. So you come back to the active hole, place the syringe, well, it's a bit difficult doing this with one hand, put it inside and very gently inject until you see the liquid starting to come out. Yeah, there you go. And again here. Has to be very gently, there's no rush. Now if I go to a different hole, you can see this hole here is not active. There's no frass around it. You can see even there's a hole within a hole. Even in the inner hole now, there's nothing active around it. So you wouldn't inject it into this hole because it'd be like closing the stable door after the horse is bolted. There's nothing in there to receive the BT and you're just wasting it. So you just keep looking all over the tree. There's another hole, but again, it's not active. So you'd be just examining the entire tree trunk, and every time you see an active hole, inject it. And this would be the last of the ecological methods. Now, the next ones are bark sprays. Now, bark sprays are not systemic, they are contact sprays. This basically means that the spray has got to make contact with something to actually kill it. So you'd have to be again vigilant of the bark, and when you see the eggs hatching or the adult present, then you'd spray. This is not ecological because it kills any type of insect it comes in contact with. And try to be a bit ecological, only spray when you see something that's worth spraying. Don't just come out every day and start running up and down the bark of the tree and killing everything in sight. So direct the spray at the nozzle so it wets the actual bark of the tree and nothing else, or at least as little as possible else. And spray only when you actually see something worth spraying. Now, the type of insecticide that you're going to be using is any type of pyrethroid insecticide. But I will ask, please only mix up the amount of insecticide you're going to use. I've seen a lot of videos where the instructions on the packet say 10 units per 4 gallons. You don't have to mix up 4 gallons. You can mix up 1 gallon and then divide by 4. Now adjust the nozzle of your sprayer so that instead of getting a fan shape, you're getting a more direct, targeted spray. And not too much pressure in the canister because you don't want to hit the bark at full speed and then get splashback. Right, well that's that. But as always, when using any type of insecticide, always protective clothing, goggles. Do it on a dull day. Today is so dull, I actually haven't seen any pollinators at all so far. Do it in the evening when the pollinators are likely to be in bed anyhow, and obviously a day without any wind. Now, make sure you do the entire circumference of the tree, both up the trunk and down the trunk, and as far as the exposed roots. What is important, as I've said before, is that this method is contact only, and therefore there has to be something to make contact with. Only use it when the eggs are hatching or when adults are present on the tree. This is not a preventative method. That's not its purpose. Well, now it's time to get the big guns out and talk about systemic insecticides. First of all, what do I mean by systemic? Well, it's something that affects the entire system or the tree as a whole as opposed to just a part of it. Now, there are two main methods to get the insecticide inside the tree. The first is through the root system, and the second is injecting straight into the trunk. The first, getting the insecticide in through the roots, is done by soil drenching, and the second, injecting into the tree, is called endotherapy. Now, this first method I'm going to explain to you is soil drenching. Now, I'm going to explain how to do it, because this is, after all, a how-to video, and therefore you need all the information at your fingertips in order to be able to take an informed decision. However, having said that, I personally don't use it because I consider it not only environmentally unfriendly, but environmentally unsafe. However, let's explain how you do it. You would take something like a watering can. You wouldn't use a spray canister because it doesn't give you sufficient drenching. So you would get a water-soluble systemic insecticide, and as per the instructions on the back of the pack, you would mix it into your watering can. And then you're going to drench the soil from the trunk out to the drip line. Now, for those of you who are newer gardeners, drip line is, you've got to imagine that the trunk of your tree is the part of the umbrella that you hold, and the canopy of the tree or the crown of the tree is the top of your umbrella. So you can imagine the rain falling, then it's running off the side, and when it gets to the edge, it drops down. And that point where it drops down is the drip line, and it forms a circle around the trunk of your tree, and that's your drip line. So now I'm going to pull back the camera so we can see the drip line on this particular tree. So this is the crown or the canopy of the tree, and you can see the outermost branches on either side. So what I would do, imagining that this is our little umbrella, is take the outermost branch, follow it down, follow it down, follow it down, follow it down, and when it hits the ground, this would be the drip line. So the drip line, would this be a long circle or a wide circle? The complete way around your tree. Now, this drip line changes depending on the type of tree you have. Some trees have a very large canopy, and it could be a lot wider, your drip line. This one is quite narrow, so the drip line is around about here. Now, first of all, you must note that I'm going to do it with plain water. I'm not going to use insecticide because, as I said, I'm against it. But just to show you, and I'm also going to do it very quickly. It is called soil drenching, so you do have to really drench the soil for it to work. Now, for the sake of the video, I don't mind if you can't see my head. What is important is that I explain the consequences of what you're doing. Now, my problem is that it's not targeted enough. My target is this tree here. But using the soil drenching method, I have not only treated this tree, but also this bush, this rose, this bush, and all of the grass underneath. Now, my problem with that is that it kills everything That means the earthworms that I've got under the grass. It means any of the little ladybugs or ladybirds that might feed on the roses or feed aphids on the roses. And of course, my blackbirds love the fruit of that myrtle. There is a lot of controversy about how far this systemic insecticide goes. Now we know it definitely affects the roots, it affects the trunks, it affects the limbs of the tree, and it affects the leaves. But are the flowers or the fruit toxic? Well, I don't know. There's far too much controversy on the internet about it, and no matter how much you research it, some say yes, some say no. So it's always advisable before using systemic insecticide to wait until your shrub or your tree has flowered. I need to go direct to my target. So for me, this is not an option. Now, this last method is endotherapy. It's the method I prefer because it is the most targeted of all of them. But it is the most toxic. And you've got to be very careful when you use something highly toxic. In some areas or in some states, you have to have a license to use it, and in others you can just be a normal homeowner. However, when you get something that's toxic, especially if it's got a skull and crossbones on it, please read the instructions. And a message for the actual manufacturers: if you are going to put a skull and crossbones on one of your products and you know that people have to use it, manage it, deal with it, and get their hands on it, please make the print a little bit bigger. Some of the print is so small, you don't even need a pair of reading glasses, you need a microscope to see it. It's like this big. And in something as important as this, you need to be able to see it. So that's just a message for the actual manufacturers, okay? So how does it work? Well, endotherapy goes directly into the tree trunk. There are several methods available out there. I'm just going to discuss two of them. The first would be Acecap. Now, Acecap is like a little capsule, and the poison is like a gel contained inside this capsule. And what you do is, depending on the circumference, well, depending on the diameter of your trunk, you'd be drilling about every 4 inches apart, holes using a normal drill, about a 6mm drill, about 1.25 inches deep. You'd be drilling holes close to the base of the tree, around the circumference. And not in a straight line, just a bit, maybe there, up, down, until you cover the entire circumference of the tree. Now, then you get your little capsule, you'd push it in as far as you can with your fingers, and then with something nice and soft, because you don't want to pierce the capsule, you'd tap it in lightly until it disappears inside the tree, and then the actual tree itself will scar over and you won't be able to see it. It'll be inside the tree, contained within the tree. Now, the tree will start feeling the benefits within a few days. And what it does is the sap, or the vascular system of the tree, the sap travels up through the capsule and takes this poison up throughout the tree, all the way through the trunk, the limbs, and into the canopy and even the leaves of the tree. And then it's the tree itself becomes poisonous. So your borers that are eating away at the wood eat the wood, which is now poisoned, and die. Now, another system with the same results is called inject and go. But in this case, instead of capsules, you're getting like a bag of insecticide with a rubber gum on the top, or rubber bung on the top, better said. And you get a very, very large hypodermic needle. You put it through the rubber bung, withdraw the insecticide, and then you would inject it into the tree. Now, you've seen me earlier on injecting BT into a hole. Now, you wouldn't do that this time because in the previous one I was actually looking for a larva. But those holes have already interrupted the sap flow, so you want a part of the tree that isn't affecting the sap flow. Then you would inject about 1.5 centimetres, about 1.25 inches deep. You go through the outer bark, into the inner bark, and into the sap vascular system. And you get the same results. Once it's injected in, it starts flowing with the sap and goes to all parts of the tree. Now, this tree behind me is about 50% dead, but it is still viable for what I want. The 50% that's still living is going to be absorb this insecticide and take it where I want it. It is important to note, obviously, that what you can't do is inject a tree that's already dead, because it works by the sap taking the insecticide up through the canopy. If the tree is dead, the vascular system is dead, and injecting will serve no purpose whatsoever. So in personal choice, I would try to go down the ecological route, and if I have to go down the systemic route, I definitely choose this one, which is the endotherapy, and is definitely more targeted, and you affect the least amount of plants possible. Now, the reason I might choose something like endotherapy is because we're talking about tree borers. They are notoriously difficult to get rid of. This is not aphids or some sort of other type of like mildew on a plant or a normal insect infestation. They are notoriously difficult to get rid of. So sometimes you do have to get out the big guns to get rid of it. Now, in this tree, as I said, it is half dead. But this rose, what this rose behind me on the obelisk is a rambling rose. And what I want to do is get it to move up through the structure of the tree behind me. If the branches are dead, then let it wind around the dead branches. And in the living part of the tree, let it come out among the leaves. It's going to look pretty gorgeous. But I need to get rid of all the twiggery. So I'm going to get out a ladder now and I'm going to start pruning. Leave the structure or the skeleton of the tree, and all the rest I'll take out. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video and have absorbed the information I've given you. There is certainly the two routes, the ecological route and the less ecological route. And certainly, if you do take the non-ecological route, the consequences or possible consequences of which route you're choosing. And if you do go down that route, take advice and do the least damage possible. It is possible to do less damage than more damage. You just need to be careful. But either way, I think you have enough information now with this video to know all the possibilities open to you and to be able to make an informed decision, and that for me is the most important thing. Now for me, I've got to clear up this mess I made. The lawn and the driveway is absolutely full of twigs. I've also wound the rambling rose in among the remaining branches, the structure or the skeleton of the tree, and it's going to look gorgeous hopefully in the summer. So please do subscribe and follow me, and I'm going to give you progress reports during the year. And of course I'll see you next Friday here in Granny's garden. So for the moment it's bye bye now. Before I go, just look at this. I've always had tete-a-tete, but this year I planted Rip Van Winkle. Isn't that gorgeous? A little fluffy tete-a-tete. Absolutely lovely. Right, definitely going now. Bye.